This is the biggest crowd I've ever been in front of, so I just want to say good morning again. I'm Brian. I'm the Chief Academic Officer for this wonderful school system, and I'm absolutely overwhelmed with gratitude just for the opportunity to serve you in this great community and this good school system. When you think about the work that we do each and every day, you see that video, we can obviously see that it takes a village to make that happen. That this work that we do together is highly personal. And what makes this school system different than most is I believe that we actually have identified what matters most. It's not the things that we have to do. It's the people that we serve. It's the people in this room, and recognizing that if we put people first, we have an opportunity to do incredible things, but we must do it together. I've had an incredible opportunity of being a part of this school system just over 11 months. And there's incredible work that's happening across this school system each and every day in every one of your schools, in every one of your classrooms. As a system, we're committed to dismantling inequities that exist across our community. We recognize that it must start with seeing them first, beginning to be curious and understand why they exist in the first place. And then when we recognize together as a team, as a family, as a community, we then have an opportunity to disrupt those inequities. We recognize that for all of those students to graduate after spending 13 years of their life with us, we also recognize that culture matters. What's the saying? Culture eats strategy for lunch just about every day, right? When you think about having to do this together with positivity, with relationships, it's also an opportunity to be a gateway to think about how to have even more courageous conversations about race, about bias, and about gender. The goals of our school system are super clear. We want to make sure that those students that they graduate, it's not just about walking across the stage and shaking the hand of their principal, our superintendent, our board members. It's recognizing after 13 years of being with you, of being with us, that they have options in their hand. And while they're there, that we have a recognition and an opportunity for them to see themselves in the experiences. And we recognize that we have challenges there. And we also recognize with the changes that are happening in our community, the need and the access to having social and emotional supports is of the utmost importance. I want to start off today by not just recognize what's in front of us and what you're committed to, but I want to say thank you to all of you for what you do each and every day to make that even a possibility. Since the moment that you recognize that this was a career choice for you, you've committed yourself to service. You've committed yourself to others. That's the most significant choice I believe that any of us could make. And so I want to say thank you. As we're beginning to launch another school year, I recognize that you haven't taken a whole lot of time off in this space. You've been gearing up and getting ready to start doing what you do best, which is teach. Before we get into the work, I think it's important for today to also be an opportunity to remind us of why we got into this profession in the first place. You know, this district gave me an incredible opportunity 2 weeks ago to travel to Boston for the first time in my life. And I had an opportunity to go to Harvard University for the first time, and I was really nervous about going. And I went with 30 schools, 30 principals. There was about 150 teachers that were there, all focused on the work of how we improve the work of literacy in our school system. And they asked me to bring greetings one morning while I was there. And I have to be honest with you, I had this incredible recognition in the moment that while I was bringing greetings, I was overwhelmed by the sense of where I was and what I was being asked to do. So I don't know if you're anything like me, but as an educator, as a student, I've been chasing achievement just about my entire life. And I always had this dream of actually stepping foot at one of the most prestigious universities in the world. That was really the pinnacle of achievement that I've kind of made it. But as I had an opportunity to stand before this podium that had their brand, their emblem on it that said the word Veritas, which spoke truth, which means truth, I was overwhelmed by my sense of some of the things that I wish I can go back as a teacher and do differently. And I see the space that I have now as a chief academic officer to provide you the permission to possibly not make the same mistakes that I once made. See, in the pursuit of achievement, there were instances as a teacher and as an assistant principal and as a principal when I cared more about where my bubble students were than who students really were and how they actually saw themselves in our community. There were actually times when I was thinking about trying to convince a student that it was worth becoming a level 2 and not a level 1 because that mattered, when all I was really doing was branding their identity with something that had no significance and not actually recognizing the brilliance that that young person had when they walked through the door. Our why matters. And I don't know if you're anything like me, but sometimes as educators we lose our way. Whether it's through state policy, federal policy, the misunderstanding and the misuse of assessment and testing, the fear of taking a risk, the fear of learning. Whatever that may be for you, I think it's rooted in an opportunity for us today to recognize that our true purpose in this world, our true purpose in this community right now, today, and for the rest of this year and for the rest of our careers, I believe are two things. To help our students make meaning of themselves and to help our students make meaning of the community in which they live and they want to serve. And it has real purpose. Over the last 11 months, I've had an opportunity with my team and with extended members of this district to visit over hundreds of classrooms together collaboratively, to speak to teachers, to think about what student work looks like, to think about what it is that they need, what is a vision that we might have for students. On your chairs when you walked in here, after speaking to thousands of team members across our system, we memorialized and crystallized what we would say in this district if we really believe our students are ready, not just to graduate, but for life post-graduation, that we recognize that they must do some things. And they must not only do them a little bit, they must do them deeply, they must do them well. The document that was on your chair today that says "We are ready" speaks to students being able to be independent. Students being able to think critically, to be collaborative in nature, to be able to be good communicators, to respond to different audiences, to appreciate different perspectives and different cultures. It's important for our students to appreciate music and the arts and their own personal health. And recognizing that learning isn't just a cognitive act, but it's also social and emotional, and the learning around those particular capacities matter more than anything. I'm hopeful as we begin to work through all of the things that we need to go through together, that we ground ourselves in our why, and we think about what these capacities can look like when we're thinking about instruction and designing instruction. So we have permission and a shared commitment for students to truly enjoy learning each and every day. For learning to matter, not just for our students, but for ourselves, for our schools, for our students, and yes, for you too, for not to be considered a number or be defined by a letter or a percentile. For our shared commitment for students to grow, but our commitment to be even stronger, that they actually begin to master some things. Building knowledge, in my opinion, is the great equalizer in life. I may be contradicted by some professors. If you're familiar with the work of Dr. Tony Wagner, he talks about in 21st century just society that knowledge is a commodity. But I would share with you, just because I can Google something or YouTube, it doesn't mean that I can do it well. Doesn't mean that I can experience it and share it with others. And so our commitment as a team to build the knowledge of our students, to help them make meaning of who they are and the purpose that they have in this world and in our life, is really mission critical. To ensure that our schools and our classrooms are set up where they're not just set up to do school, but they're set up where students can actually ask us for help. And so can you. For our students and for you as teachers and school leaders to feel confident, capable, and see the possibilities of what actually can happen when we do it together. What would it take for all of our students in all of our classrooms in this community to truly access their voice? For them to rise up and think about changing the world? not just for some kids, but for all kids. That's the work. But it's not just about lifting and lofting up into the big screens that are in front of you, these aspirations of what we want school to be like for all of our kids. It's actually beginning to name things and call them out when they don't align to those principles. We have all participated in a broader system, an educational system, that says that it values those things. But if we are honest with each other, many times our actions and our measurements don't align to that. In some instances, you may say that the broader educational system lacks integrity. But I have hope, because I believe CMS is a beacon of light in this space, because what makes this district different, what makes me grateful to be a part of it, is that our district, in service of breaking the link, is willing to name and discuss what most districts would say are truly undiscussable. Most organizations are more willing to protect their image than to name their hard truths. So it's because of that, when we can see it, we can begin to understand what we have to do together, to know that when we identify those shared commitments, I really believe as a system and as a community, we are ready to do something special together. I do believe that we are poised, that we have all of the talent that we need in this room. But we also have to recognize and internalize that this is going to require many of us to change, not just thinking that our students that we serve have to change. So our path forward is outlined in another document that was shared with you. I'm not going to read it to you. It outlines our school system's mission and vision and beliefs, our theory of action. But what's most important about our way of work is understanding the role that we have to play. Because I believe, like students, you yourselves, if we can get clear in what we want teachers to be able to do, what we want school leaders to be experts in, I believe we're all here to serve. I believe your commitment is stronger than any other stakeholder group in the world. But we have to recognize that we have to do this together and not to each other. So there are a couple key steps that you should be experiencing in the year ahead that I'm incredibly excited about, and I'm sure many of you are incredibly nervous about. Adopting an aligned curriculum is a place to start. See, there was a great thought about a decade ago that when standards changed across this country, that there was going to be this experience of an overhaul of all of the text that we put in front of students. And the type of thinking and the type of learning that takes place would change in order to support their reading. But what happened, unfortunately, is those texts never came. And I don't know if you're anything like me. When I was actually going through this as a principal, my experience to understanding what those new standards was actually a 45-minute webinar. See, the same time that we raised expectations for you, raised expectations for students, a recession took place. And we've never provisioned a guaranteed viable curriculum in many of our classrooms. And in the absence of that over a decade, many of you are convinced in some ways, and through conversations that I've had with a lot of you, that you don't need it or you don't deserve it. That's unfair. You've been asked to create everything. And not a CMS, that's across the country. And you've done it with pride, with ownership, with incredible passion in trying to serve your students. The work and our commitment as a district to invest in a standard-aligned curriculum is never meant for you to be robotic. It is not meant for anybody to walk in your room and ask you what page you're on. I've talked to many of you, and there's still PTSD in this community around what open court looked like a long time ago. And that is not what this is. But this is recognizing that every one of our students and every one of our teachers deserves a guaranteed floor of excellence. You as a professional, based upon the needs of your students, the unique environments in which you live and you work, decide what that ceiling is based upon the readiness of your students. But the shared commitment that we need to have with each other for all students, not just some, is that we don't go below the floor. Now, we recognize with the particular grade levels that are being impacted, the particular schools that are being impacted, this work hasn't captured all 9,000 of our teachers, but it has captured over 3,000 of them. So we recognize that there's also other work to be doing around instructional design, instructional practice. I mean, if you think about the work of learning, designing, and practicing and repeat, I mean, that's what we're really asking students to do each and every day. But the work that we have to do together has to inherently focus on quality. As a result of economic conditions improving over the last decade, a lot of the solutions that have been thrown at all of us, including myself, are rooted in technology. And there's nothing wrong with technology, but what I would share with you is when we're looking at Pinterest or Teacher Pay Teacher, it's really difficult to understand what's quality and what's not. In speaking to teachers, many of you are spending over 7 to 9 hours a week trying to identify what are the best resources. And when you think about what that looks like, it's not only different school to school, but it's different when you walk in the same grade level, same content area within the same school. Which brings us back to our commitments of how can we guarantee an equitable learning experience when the learning experience may not have a standard. And so we have work and a commitment to you around professional learning to help begin to get better at these particular spaces. And many of you, we need to call upon you because you're already experts in this space. A piece that we need to continue to commit to as we work through this journey together is attending to the language of the standards. Now, to be honest with you, that's not the sexiest thing for us to be able to do together, right? Attending to the language of the standards. But I need to name an undiscussable truth. In our community, in our school system, we are graduating almost all of our students. Over almost 90% of our students are graduating out of every single cohort. But when we backwards map that into our students truly being able to be college and career ready, it may be less than half. Now, that's not an indictment on teachers, because you haven't been resourced to actually do the things that many of you have been asked to do. But in fairness, we need to get better at really understanding what our standards are asking for. The document that I shared with you earlier, the We Are Ready document, is in service of that. These are not aspirational goals of hope. This is actually what our standards are asking kids to be able to do. And so having deep work and deep conversation through your PLCs, through your leadership meetings, through our ILT structures, about really analyzing whether the tasks that we're putting in front of kids are aligned to the expectations of what our standards or the beliefs that we have for our students in the first place. And do we need to reconcile the two things? Another charge that's in front of us as a community, and it's a courageous one, is that we need to begin to talk about the role that race plays in our work. There's a researcher that I'm becoming more familiar with who leads the Equity Literacy Initiative. His name is Paul Gorski. I don't know if any of you follow him on Twitter. But he talks about the hard truth of racial equity being almost impossible to attain when we are obsessively committed to only meeting students where they're at. When where they're at is fraught with racial bias and privilege. Now, I'll share with you, I'm not an expert in these conversations. I'm uncomfortable even talking about it. But if I don't go through that discomfort with you, then we can truly never begin to understand the inequities that we have in our school system together. We have to begin to look at ourselves, to do the necessary mirror work, to think about how it is that we show up in our classrooms, in our communities each and every day. Because I believe that all of our intentions are great, but we have data that suggests that we have inequities that deserve dismantling, and I think we can all get behind that. That work starts by truly just examining the biases that exist in our institution, in our community, in our society. It begins to think about how we begin to eradicate fixed monocultural mindsets in our community by doing this heavy work together. But I believe in you and I believe in this school system that doing this together over time gives us an opportunity to give our students, all of our students, a chance. Now, I said a lot there, but the true commitment of the work that's in front of us, and I'm hopeful that you see that it's exciting, is not just about making learning more engaging. It's deeper than that. It's not just making it more joyful, which I believe is a part of our core mission and core business. But it's realizing that together as adults, we're going to need to grapple with what we know. We're going to need to grapple with our attitudes and what we actually believe kids can and can't do. And we're going to need to be able to do that together in a safe space where it's okay to feel uncomfortable and still feel valued. We're going to need to be able to question our aspirations and our skills and the behaviors that we bring into our classrooms each and every day. Because if it's not us that does that, then who will? It is an honor to serve you, and it's an honor to be a part of this work with you. And my commitment to you as we continue to talk about why this opportunity is right now in this community is for us to recognize that it has to be done together. This can't feel like something is being done to you. And if you have felt that way as a result of some of the changes that we have made in the last few months, I want to take personal ownership over that and say, I'm sorry. I'm hopeful that through this journey we have an opportunity to get a chance to know each other better, to recognize where we're coming from, and you to realize how much gratitude this board, this cabinet has on behalf of the heavy work that you do each and every day to serve our students. I'd like you to please give a warm welcome to my friend and my colleague, Dr. Frank Barnes, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about why this opportunity is important today. Thank you.